there's a lot of factors coming into risk, right? There's the building, there's the realtor. What else do we have?
Could be market, could be government. Risk is multifaceted for sure. Well, in the 90s, a very popular style was known as an EFIS panel building. A lot of those EFIS buildings, it starts to get very, very risky.
So what system should we be looking for in high-rise?
Subject to inspection doesn't de-risk what the potentials necessarily are to a degree. And there's always going to be risk that is out of our control, be it through taxation or what governments are doing. People often feel that they have to use their family friends.
Yes. Don't do that. Don't hire your brother or your mom to do your real estate transaction.
Right. Also, some inspectors out there, much like realtors, that probably maybe shouldn't be doing what they're doing.
How do you avoid risk when you're purchasing real estate? Well, risk, there's a lot of factors coming into risk, right? There's the building, there's the realtor. What else do we have?
Could be market, could be government. Yeah, I mean, risk is multifaceted for sure.
Right.
At the end of the day.
Well, let's uncover it all today. So why don't we start with the building side of the risk we need to watch out for? So those are like if there's mold or things that we can't see, or the ground.
Yeah, I mean, typically, people are, when they're writing offers, they're going to write subject to inspection, but subject to inspection doesn't de-risk what the potentials necessarily are to a degree. So I think if you're talking structures, you have to keep in mind where we live. We live in a temperate rainforest. Mm-hmm. So you think of the building models, for example, in the 90s, a very popular style was known as an EFIS panel building.
What does that mean?
It's where it's exterior clad in an EFIS system, and it's a single skin
What did you say,
EFIS.
Why do you use more words to explain words I don't know?
Yeah, it's real. This is, if you want to sell real estate, you got to know these things, because this is a very important piece.
Okay, can you say it in a more simple term?
So it's a wrap building of construction. You've got a concrete, tower going up, and on your exterior. So if you think of the new style now is what they call a curtain wall window system.
Okay.
If you look at Shangri-La or you look at 8X, right? Those are basically glazing systems that go down the exterior of a building. That's glass.
Okay.
Right. But an EFIS system is different, because what you've got is a single skin on the outside, and load in that is carried inside. And the developers used it back in the 90s because it was a very easy way for them to build efficiently. But unfortunately, that model is what was based out of sunny Southern California and would work well in a sunny region. But when you look at where we live in the world in the Pacific Northwest, we get a lot of precipitation. Mm-hmm. And over time, now we're kind of at that 20 to 30, 35-year window. A lot of those EFIS buildings, it starts to get very, very risky. You cannot build that building now.
Okay.
Right? So the province does not let a developer build an EFIS tower building.
So why is EFIS bad in a temperate rainforest?
What is one of the biggest concerns in any sort of structure would be water.
Okay.
Right? If water becomes has its ability to get in, now if you get a systemic failure, so if the envelope is failing and it's not just spot where you can maintain it, but if it's truly a systemic failure, the cost to rehabilitate the site can be tens, 20s, 30s, millions of dollars.
And water getting in, it would be from what? Because it doesn't let it pass through well enough, or how does it get in?
So a lot of people talk about Fairview and the leaky condos back in the day, and they talk about rain screening, right? So you hear that term a lot, where you've got a vapor barrier in behind the wall that allows the water to get through. Mm-hmm. The challenge is that in a 10, 20, 30, 40, 50-story building, you don't rain screen a building.
Okay.
So in the early 2000s, we went to what was known as a concrete punch-out in Vancouver. It's a very common system. To me, I describe it as a tank. It will last for the test of time. You paint it every 15 years. The building will never have issue as long as you maintain it.
Okay.
And then from there, we saw the curtain wall window systems come in as early as sort of 2010, and you see a lot of the developers still using that now.
Right.
Concord did that early on with some of the spandrel panels and the systems down here on Marina side.
And is the curtain wall the best system to be using right now?
Well, if you think about it, glass is basically impenetrable to water.
Okay.
Right? So you think you have a shower, you have a piece of glass that blocks the water.
Right.
So if you've got sealant around that glass, then water is not going to get through and find its path of least resistance. So at the end of the day, a glass is impenetrable, when it comes to water, and therefore the likelihood of it lasting a very, very long time is good.
Before, a lot of the penetrable stuff was more on the concrete side. That's what made it penetrable?
No, the cladding was what we're talking about for water penetration. So the cladding. So if you think of the EFIS, think of it as like a sweater, how they wrap the building. Mm-hmm. If you ever watch towers going up, I mean, a typical developer would want to pour a floor of concrete a week as they were going up on their schedule for the build, and then they would wrap the building with the outside materials.
Right.
And so you can see that in construction. But at
But
the end
if
of the
the outside, if you have a completely glass building, that's not something you worry about, right? On the exterior.
nowadays code, yeah, it's a lot safer. But the challenges in the resale market, there's a significant portion of development built throughout, Western Canada that is an EFIS system, and a lot sort of in Vancouver and Victoria. And I think it's something that a lot of people aren't talking about. But I
Right.
think from a risk standpoint, it's probably one of the greatest risks for purchasers right now.
Interesting. Well, this only applies more to high rises.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay, so let's simplify this. So one thing is, if I'm going to look to buy a high rise, I should first ask if it's an EFIS system or not. And if I hear it, I should probably run.
You should be well aware of it at the end of the day, because the risk, because what happens is that if they have to reclad the outside, you're looking at probably a 2 to 3 year time frame where they're going to put scaffolding up around the outside. They're going to wrap it in tarp. There's been a few buildings that have been redone downtown, but the other challenge is that you're living behind curtains, to the outside for probably 2 years while they do it.
Right.
And then the other issue is a 3/4 vote for Strata to agree to spend a 10, 15, 20, $30 million assessment. We haven't seen that pass very much, but
Yeah.
there's a lot of that coming.
Well, let's say it is an EFIS system. At what point in the lifespan of the building does usually that renovation come in? Because if I was smart and I think other people don't know, okay, I'm going to buy right now, rent it out, I'm going to sell it before I think it's going to start going into that renovation period.
Yeah, but if you think about it, next month, 2025, so realistically, I mean, it's probably a 30-year lifespan on a lot of that product, unless the stratas have maintained it. But maintaining doesn't necessarily fix the issues. It's
Right.
just Band-Aids.
Okay. So no EFIS systems. So what system should we be looking for in high rises?
I think if you're looking at curtain wall or if you're looking at concrete punch out, it's a lot safer.
So waterproofing super important. Well, I remember when I went to the Concord Brentwood thing. I don't know what they were talking about. I didn't really pay attention, but they were really highlighting a water.
Yeah, I
something
mean,
related feature.
technology, and fortunately, somebody like Terry, like technology, and those that are adopting it, there's a lot of technology in regards to risk prevention again, and a lot of that comes down to insurance, right? At the end of the day, so if water is picked up by some of those sensors, it can immediately snap and turn off the water, and then you're not going to get your dishwasher flooding or your washer dryer.
Is that what their system was? A sensor?
Sensor? Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah,
and
that's
to
my
cut off.
understanding. Exactly. If it trips, it cuts off the water to the unit. Because the challenge be, if you talk to anyone in the leasing department or anyone that's been affected by a flood, typically a flood occurs because somebody, if it comes from inside somebody's unit, something went wrong and somebody wasn't present and something continued to flow and can cause millions
That's
of dollars.
super. Okay, let's say if someone who's living in the penthouse floods the entire building, like who's responsible for that?
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, it depends how the flood was caused, but if it came from within unit, the unit itself is the responsibility of the
Really?
owner.
So
Yeah.
if you went on a vacation and you accidentally left at some point people probably figure out when their roof is dripping.
You would hope so, but if that person's gone, then water will find its path of least resistance, and all of a sudden it could be 3 or 4 floors lower, and somebody
Right.
realizes the water
And
coming.
you can't really
is coming
stop it. If everything's dripping, what is that person in that unit who's getting dripped on gonna stop it?
in. And what if they're away? And what if the person below them's away, right? So I had a closing probably about 5 or 6 years ago where we sold the property, and before it closed, the property was flooded out by a unit upstairs.
Right.
Right. So yeah, I mean, water damage can be a big negative, unfortunately. I mean, the new technology, Concord and some of the major developers, and even Stratas are looking at doing some of the adoption towards some of the technology in pre-existing, just to prevent potential loss issues at the end of the day.
Whether you're a first-time buyer, seasoned investor, or ready to sell, Prompton Real Estate Services is your go-to partner in Vancouver. Their market knowledge, personalized service, and commitment to success set them apart. Take the next step with confidence. Visit Prompton.com and let Prompton Real Estate Services help you achieve your real estate goals.
Well, so when I'm buying like a house, a single detached, how much of the roofing, or should I be looking at personally, or I like the inspector just look at that?
Yeah, I mean, obviously an inspector is going to view what they see, but they aren't necessarily going to tell you the style being right or wrong. Right. So I think some of it should be researched by the purchaser, and hopefully the realtor they're working with has
Also,
knowledge.
some inspectors when they come in, I've had one inspector come in who was like super social, and I felt like they were spending more of their focus talking to me than inspecting the property.
Yeah, I mean, I've been around Cheese for 13 years now, and I've probably seen over 1,000 inspectors. There's some great ones,
Yeah.
for sure, that are very educational and are very well versed and definitely educate the client to help make the right decision. But there's also some inspectors out there, much like realtors, that probably maybe shouldn't be doing what they're doing.
Well, is it difficult to get your inspector license?
I don't know that. I would imagine it's probably not that
Super
difficult.
Uh-huh. Yeah, finding a good inspector. Well, usually a good realtor would know a good inspector.
For sure.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's de-risking on the water side. We talk a lot about this water thing, specifically in Vancouver. Well, I'm pretty sure in Canada there's not many, or the prairies are dry.
Exactly. I mean, the West Coast, the wet coast, if people want to call it that, or the Pacific Northwest. I mean, we're known to be a high moisture area. So water, in structure is vastly important and significantly serious.
Yeah. Okay, so we'll move on to the next topic. If anyone wants to continue the water topic, it's ChatGPT. To look out for on your house in terms of flooding. Okay, so that's the risk part of the water. What else do we have? Let's stay with the building before we move on to anything else.
Stay with the building. Pitfalls to be aware of. I mean, it's tough because some of the additional risks you can't necessarily quantify at the time, right? We've seen a lot of government interaction since 2016, so that impose some potential pullbacks on pricings in different subsets. So I mean, there's always going to be risk that is out of our control, be it through taxation or what governments are doing.
Well, in the building itself, what is the most often? So through all your clients who have bought buildings, you probably work with more high-end clients now, but maybe when you're starting out early or throughout your career, what is the most surprise you see from a client? Like, oh, I didn't know it was like this. Do you have a certain amount of reaction that stood out the most after they purchased the home?
A lot of what I probably did from the very get-go, even back in 2012, was education and helping clients maybe better understand. So there wasn't a lot of surprises, but sometimes real estate can be a very emotional purchase.
Right.
And so I think there's potential cost risk if you become so emotionally invested in what you're buying, because at that point maybe you're not being as analytical in pricing,
right,
and you're letting your emotions drive your action.
That's a very good point. That's also super related with risk, because a lot of people who are purchasing purely off emotion, that is risk.
For sure. You could be paying 10% more, because all of a sudden you're emotionally invested. If you think about it, fear of loss, right? When the market is crazy, I mean, we've had properties where we list a property on a Monday. We've got direction regarding presentation of offers the following Monday. You have 187 showings. You have 29 offers. You have 16 unconditional, 9 with deposit check. Then that's fear of loss. So that's another big driver in real estate for sure.
So do you think a real estate purchase should be purchased without emotion or minimal emotion?
If you think about on the commercial side, right, everything is numbers based.
Yeah. Well, it's a business on the commercial side.
Exactly.
Isn't living in your home quite emotional?
It definitely can be, but you can also get caught up, given situations where you can become so overly emotionally attached that therefore you could throw pricing and be costly by accident.
Right. So we talked about the building, we talked about the buyer. Now let's talk about the realtor. How do we avoid risk on the realtor?
Risk on the realtor, I think at the end of the day, due diligence is a big thing. I mean, typically buyers nowadays...
Due diligence towards the realtor?
A lot of people that I've ended up working for have, wanted to do something, they've wanted to transact, they go through open houses, they meet 15 to 20 realtors. Right. In a way, they may be looking at property, but they're probably also looking for a realtor. Right. And so in theory, you think about it, they're almost interviewing you blindly to see if you maybe have knowledge and information that could be beneficial in their home search.
Well, how do I avoid the risk of choosing a bad real estate agent?
I think at the end of the day, it's beneficial because it's tough. I mean, a good realtor is honestly like an amazing financial advisor for people.
Yeah.
Right. And so it's tough because I think sometimes people often feel that they have to use their family friends.
Yes. Don't do that. Don't hire your brother or your mom to do your real estate transaction.
Right. Or they'll because they think that family member is going to give them a discount back on the commission at the end of the day. And then, a lot of people will use referrals, but are those referrals really warranted, or are they just friendly referrals? I mean, there's a lot of very social realtors out there. Right. So it just depends, because I think when you really get into the business, there's some that have immense understanding of asset, immense understanding of the market, and just knowledge that is so far above the typical that people will often, if they meet them, they will gravitate towards it because they will become comfortable with it. The other risk too could be a new realtor, right? Because a lot of what we do, like when we're selling property, one of the discussions with a client is I'm here to ensure that you don't face legal action later, right? So, there's a lot of disclosures that need to be made
That's
too.
a really good point. I personally think, well, actually, I don't know the real estate education course now, but when I did it like 10 years ago, it was a long time ago, I feel like it was too easy to become a real estate agent. And also when you go through that course, like after you're done, you don't actually know what you're doing. You're just like going out there, you're just kind of getting screwed if you're not with a team.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things, it's like sink or swim, right? You get your license, but a lot of what you practice in theory isn't necessarily applicable in the daily.
Right.
For sure.
And also it's just, well, I think real estate is just as important of his job as like being a lawyer. It's like, it's equal responsibilities. The education should be so much deeper for it.
Yeah, I mean, I think at the end of the day that it's so true, right? Because you look at it, anyone can sign up, as long as you have I think it's a grade 12 English requirement. Is that what it is? Was it LTSA or no, whatever it was? But there was a language requirement, and then it was a certain passing grade on an exam.
I remember the exam. The English is actually quite difficult.
Yeah. And I mean, there's a fair bit of math to it, and apparently they've added more math to it now.
Well, math you can memorize, but English you got to comprehend.
For sure. Yeah. And then once you write the exam, what you do in the daily aspect of the career is not really applicable to what the studies necessarily were from the exam side, right? So I think they have added some continuing education, right? So there is some nice aspect in terms of the relicensing that are requirements every 2 years. So I think that there is, for agents that want to go and understand more and learn more, there are actually some very good courses with the board.
Right.
But the exam itself isn't a blueprint on how to become a successful realtor. It's just enough of an exam to make sure that you can have a license.
You're not just a schmuck. It's a schmuck exam,
right?
that you can at least learn.
For sure.
Okay, so let's do a quick recap. There's 3 ways to de-risk that we mainly talked about. One is on the building, which we heavily focus on the topic of water, flooding.
100%.
Second is from the buyer, try to avoid too emotional purchases and unrealistic expectations. And third is de-risking from finding a unqualified or new real estate agent.
They could be new if they're great.
Yeah.
You don't know that, right? But I think at the end of the day, it's good to speak with many and find the right one that's going to fit with what it is the consumer's looking for. For sure.
Okay. Well, if you guys enjoyed this video, make sure to like, comment, subscribe, and we'll see you next time.